Great, so as I teased, we're going to be talking in more detail about how this actually comes to life. We've got some real life examples with us on the stage today. But Cristina, I want to start with you. The UK Green Business Council Buildings Council has worked on doing a built environment virtual pavilion for COP26. So explain to us what is a virtual pavilion and why are you doing it here now?
Yes. I think one of the big barriers for taking climate action is inclusivity and getting people curious and inspired of things that are actually happening instead of still continuing to explain the problem and explain. I think we're done with that. So on account of COP26, last June 2021, we launched a big call to action. The UK Green Building Council led this project. There's over 100 partners involved, including the World Green Building Council. And we managed to get 17 exemplar projects in a virtual pavilion. So it's called the Build Better Now Virtual Pavilion for COP26. I'll share the website in a bit. But it was really so interesting to see the projects that are right now tackling the climate crisis, but also the biodiversity crisis looming, and really showcasing that as we go into cities, regions, and built environment day happening this Thursday at COP26 in the Blue Zone, there is actually hope. There is actually solutions that can be scaled up, and there is professionals that are living with a purpose, not only just running their businesses. So I think it's really inspiring in a moment where we need to understand that the built environment, because of its current unsustainability characteristics, is a big problem to the climate crisis. Almost 40% of energy-related greenhouse emissions comes from buildings. And I think we're all sick of saying that stat. And we need just to showcase a vision of the possible, get people on a road to net zero, but also bringing the social component on board of inclusivity and showcasing that this is happening around the world, from favelas in Brazil tackling energy poverty, to affordable homes in New Zealand, to great things happening here in the UK around other geographies, Asia Pacific. And it's the power of the World GBC network of over 72 green building councils in different geographies saying, let's scale this up. We want the world to listen, and we want you to get inspired.
I promised we were going to show some real life examples about how you actually bring these things to life. So Chris, I'm going to start with you because we're giving you the home field advantage. Your project is about 3 kilometers down the road from where we sit right now in Glasgow. So tell us about the retrofit of 107 Nidri Road.
So I'm hoping it'll appear on the screen behind us. It's a passive house level retrofit of a stone tenement in Glasgow. We have 75 stone tenements in Glasgow, so we have a lot of work to do on those. But it's called Retrofit. It's passive house level, so we will reduce the carbon emissions in that building by roughly 90%. And that obviously has that's advantage for carbon, but it also has a significant advantage for poverty, well, for people who are going to be living there. So the people living here, this is social housing, so they will have the least money of the people that are living in Glasgow and the fewest options, really. So being able to make that, give them that benefit, I think is a really big thing for us as architects. There's that. There's the aspect of health. We know that passive house is a comfort standard, so we can make it. We know that it won't overheat. We know that it won't be too cold. We know that we're managing moisture, so you won't get mold and condensation on windows and things like that. But we're also taking out a lot of the chemicals that are normally put into modern buildings. So we're dealing with health in the long term for the people. And lastly, I would say there's a heritage aspect to this. One of the issues which we come across as architects is when we try to make buildings energy efficient, we risk damaging their heritage. So we've worked quite closely here to make sure that the outside of the building and the stonework and the fabric of the building is protected, as well as making it energy efficient.
I know this is a small image behind us, so I'm not sure everybody can read it, but it goes into a lot of the details on things like the insulation that you guys have changed and some of the the nitty-gritty about what you actually changed as part of this project. So can you tell us about one thing that you think has a very dramatic impact? What's one thing that maybe people don't think about what the insulation is like, but actually that has a huge impact?
Probably the main thing that we do as passive house architects is not so much saying that there's going to be lots of insulation, but making sure the insulation meets So there are lots of annoying details where you do the easy bit there, you do the easy bit there, but you miss that bit. And the analogy I use is holes in the bucket. We're closing off the holes in the bucket, but until we get down to no holes, we're not actually fixing the problem. So a lot of our time is spent on that. And I would say that almost all of the energy we're saving is not because we're using innovative things. We're just doing normal things that everybody's familiar with, but we're doing them better, really.
That's great. We have a totally different example with our other host country of Italy, the Milan Innovation District, or MIND. Tell us about this. First of all, tell us about this, and then I have a follow-up question about the way you describe it.
All right. Well, we're sitting at the other end of crisis spectrum, to be honest, because we have 100-hectare real estate and regeneration in the northwest of Milan. This is where Expo 2015 took place, so a huge immaterial legacy, but also an important material legacy made of canal, made of road infrastructure that is already there. We at Lendlease are typically doing these projects globally, but we really set ourselves a bold target of meeting the challenges that Cristina was saying. You know, how are we going to provide a sustainable, 100% sustainable and decarbonized precinct for the 60,000 people that will live there over time? And time is important. We are used to work on a 10 to 15 years horizon. So, you know, most of the promises and the discussion that are happening here at COP are actually aligned to our horizon. And we need to make strategic decisions now to see the fruits and to see the results in the next 10, 15 years. I think one of the main strategic decisions we made was to power all the site and get the energy side completely from renewable sources. This meant making a bold decision to implement a heating and cooling system that nurtures on the water on the side and nurtures on the solar panel of the buildings, and that buys the energy that is still required only from greenhouse sources. Other aspects are related to how we are making the building more future-proof, for example, embodying the carbon through using timber technologies, or reviewing the way the mobility works on site. For example, decoupling the parkings from the building seems like, you know, a normal thing to do. It's not normal when you start looking at the practicalities of it. So, you know, energy, embodied carbon of building, and mobility are, we believe, the three key elements that we are looking to decarbonize in order to provide a better solution and a more interesting urban precinct for the people that will live there.
As Chris was talking about the retrofit in Glasgow, he kept mentioning about the people who are going to live in these homes, right? And that's something that struck me as well as I was reading about Mind, how you all describe this project. You talk a lot about the people who are going to live there or work there, be around there. And I would love for you to talk about a unique part of your neighborhood and one of your neighbors, which is the prison that's right next to Mind. So how have you built a relationship with them? Yeah, it's a project that we're very, very, very close and very proud of, because normally, you know, for a real estate developer, having a prison next door is typically maybe not a disaster, but definitely a question mark, you know, for an investor. And we decided to flip the script and actually open the gates of our prison and open to some extent the gates to the prison. We were lucky enough to have a prison institute that was very progressive, very open, and we started developing a relation first with the Minister of Justice and then down to the directors of the prison that maybe look at three key areas. The first is to get people that serve in prison to spend time with us at work. And then so, for example, in our accounting department, there are people that are currently serving in prison. That works both ways. It works for them, and it works also for our staff to start seeing that, you know, inmates and people serving in prison are just people like us and can do work like everyone else does. And then we have the food component. Our catering is offered by a restaurant that is provided by prison inmates. And also we're spending our community day. 100% of our staff spend half a day, or probably even more, a day in this year, spending time in prison and understanding what is real life means for them and doing renovation work within the site. So overall, try and flip the script of this typical element is exciting, and it's something to bring also a bit of fun into the topic of sustainability and regeneration. And Cristina, I know you guys recently put out a report around these same issues of thinking about the social components. Tell us more about that.
Yes, last Thursday at the Blue Zone at COP26, we launched a report called Beyond the Business Case. And actually flipping the conversation around why developers why the built environment industry should go to sustainability and deep climate action. And in this report, we put social value up in front and center because, yes, we can demonstrate the financial, the economic business case, but sometimes people get hung up there. Oh, the extra cost at the beginning. And come on. If we look at putting people first and bringing social value with the idea that cost is an investment, that you cannot really not afford not to invest in a sustainable built environment when you look at this perspective. And then actually, sustainability becomes good business because it's not about just the asset, it's about people and communities, right? And the report has case studies that actually speak to the Build Better Now virtual pavilion because it's the other side of, okay, what's the examples, what's the world-class arguments happening, what are the trends going through, of course, even the value of natural capital, right? It's also a value proposition now, how to regenerate ecosystems through the work we do, but also going deep in what has to be happening now for us to truly develop places that are good for our health, for our children, for sustainability. So it was really exciting because it kind of married up with all of these initiatives we've been launching in this huge campaign at COP26 where there's over 100 events around the built environment, and I think that's a first. Even COP21 was really small on buildings and built environment. So I feel the momentum, and I hope people embrace here the idea of creating social value through the built environment. All of the rest will fall into place.
Chris, I saw that about 1 in 5 homes in Scotland could be defined as a tenement, which is the type of building that you guys repeated.
Tenement, yeah.
Yes. So this is a huge challenge. And the mayor of Bristol earlier was talking about the challenges of retrofitting, not just from the financing angle like Christina's talking about, but also from the skills. Do we have the skills needed to have people be able to do this? Have you experienced that, or are you seeing it in a different way?
I think it's overplayed that, if I'm honest, because all of the environmental buildings we've done, all of the passive house buildings, the specialist buildings, have been done by builders who hadn't done one before. They've all been done like that. So it seems to me that it is entirely possible for people who aren't necessarily specifically trained to up their game. My experience has been that the majority of people that I'm working with are capable of doing what we're asking them. So yes, there needs to be more training, but I would suggest that that is also for the architects, for the designers, for the people making the strategic decisions. The majority of people coming along and doing the work are, in my experience, perfectly capable of doing it actually already.
So what do you see the biggest challenges for retrofitting? Is it, like you said, earlier in the stage with the architects and with the design? Is it the financing?
But political choice is the number one thing because, because I mean, obviously cost, but it doesn't take long to look across at the different things that we spend money on and to come to the conclusion that it's really just about choice. These things are quite expensive, but so are lots of other things which don't have nearly as many co-benefits to people. So, yeah, choice, simple choice, really, politically and financially.
Stefano, can you talk to us about how you've managed this as a public-private partnership? Because you guys have built something that, again, brings in so many different communities. It does bring in the political angle.
Yeah. So the political and the public angle is fundamental. We are, as Mind, the largest public-private partnership in real estate in Italy. And as an investor initially, as Lendlease, we really looked at that as a source of value because it stabilizes the political environment. It guarantees a safe pipeline on which to deploy first capital and then design and then execution and then management, and essentially provides with a good sounding board also to implement and deploy technologies that will not be applicable elsewhere but can find an applicable legislative framework in mind to be developed. Examples, drones. Example, closing the road for automated vehicles. That's something that we can do at Mind, we will struggle to do elsewhere. So I think this political and public-private interplay is fundamental also in the backdrop of the large EU funding mechanism that is coming together in the next 5 years to really show that the two components can work together and can drive value together. There's a lot of learning there.
I'd love to hear from both of you. Just give us an example of how people in this audience, we're all in a building, we all live in buildings, right? We're all experiencing the built environment. what's one thing that you think is going to change coming from your projects or coming from the things that you're seeing in the space? What's going to change about the built environment for us in the next couple of years? Is it something small like the insulation that you mentioned, Chris, or is there some big way we're going to interact?
Well, I know what I'm seeing. 20, 30 years ago, we were all talking about insulation. That was 70s and 80s and 90s. And then we all got excited. This is in Britain, of course. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but certainly for us, we then all started talking about air tightness. That was the thing, and that was controversial, but it's certainly the way it's going. In my view, the next thing will be ventilation and air quality, and COVID will have made some difference to everybody's appreciation of that. But I think the risk we run is that we make buildings too sealed up, and then we don't have good air quality, we don't have good ventilation. So my guess is that will be the next thing that we'll start seeing quite a lot of.
I think the best learning of the COVID pandemic is that people will start using buildings differently. We firmly believe that offices will be transformed into community hubs, where office workers will want to go to be recognized in the community in which they work. Residential assets will really be complemented by kindergarten, co-working spaces, places with green areas. So really, very much, I don't see a big change in the assets, bar from the necessary upscale in the performance. That is a must, and I see that as a trend. I see a big trend in the way people use the buildings.
Yeah. Cristina, I'll turn the same question to you. What do you think is going to change?
Well, hearing them out, I think beyond how we use spaces, I think we have also changed our behavior in cities. Also, what we value is good, is that where we want to be, right? Now that we're allowed to go out of our 1 kilometer radius, it's about green space, it's about communities, it is about the feeling of place, right? And the feeling of good quality of life. And paired to that, and going a little bit on the macro level, if you see all the changes in countries announcing net zero ambitions, committing more climate pledges into buildings in what we see in these negotiations, that means that in the future there will be more policy signals for decarbonizing, which means actually better buildings. So we're going to stop doing bad buildings. I think there's a good policy signal to stop the nonsense, because what showcases in the pavilion and all of these great work is that it just takes the right purpose, the right curiosity, and the right values to be delivering on this. It's not rocket science. So I think marrying up the two scales, I think people valuing good quality of life, but also policies being more ambitious and enabling through what we're showcasing in that pavilion that it is possible, just going for it and being more ambitious and bolder regulations that can enable us to have a built environment that is fit for our health, for the future, for sustainability. It would be nice to see. I'm hopeful.
Chris, what do you think would incentivize more projects like yours to come to life?
Well, the one thing that we've worked on as architects is to try and get exemplars to show people, because for most of my experience has been when you see something and you realize it's not that scary, it's actually much, much better. So I've traveled a lot as part of learning about ecological buildings, and I've seen really wonderful buildings, wonderful communities, wonderful areas all over Britain, particularly in Europe, and just come back and thought, we should be doing this, we should be doing this. It's not, it's too difficult, Chris. It's not. So inspiring people to do good things, when you see them and you see how safe and reasonable it is to live in a nice place, it really helps. It's helped me, and I'm hoping it will help other people.
And Stefano, what would you say to other architects, other people coming like Chris to come see, what's a big takeaway from Mind?
Well, the big takeaway from Mind is you can do things differently, all the way from getting the right investors to getting the right sort of set of designers to the delivery. I think the best incentives that we can give to the industry is to give a clear framework whereby sustainability and decarbonization is actually measured, because that will help drive investment and drive value and drive partnership with the supply chain and with the tenants and with the people that will use the buildings. This is, I believe, the best incentive that can be done. A clear standardization.
And Cristina, last question for you. What do you hope comes from COP26 for the built environment?
Oh, okay. So I'm hopeful that we will keep the topic up high in the agenda going into next year's COP. in Egypt, in the global south. There will also be a conversation about resiliency and adaptation and the co-responsibility of these great projects on how can we help other regions of the world that are going to be urbanizing at a high rate avoid locking in bad buildings that we have done also in other geographies. And of course, that we will follow through those pledges on acting on buildings to actually help enable performance, addressing the value chains going into the built environment, that businesses at this COP have committed big time into the race to zero, but then trickling that down into action, into transparency, into life cycle assessment, into a conversation about what is happening already and scaling it up. I think that is, we're past explaining it's part of the problem. It's about continuing to inspire everyone to be on the path to do this, because it's common sense. It's just good engineering, good architecture, good urban planning. And from a policy perspective, it makes sense that our money from taxpayers goes into good projects.
Please join me in thanking Chris, Stefano, and Cristina.